French cigarette smoke hung thick in the briefing room, mingling with the scent of wet leather and aviation oil. Beyond the fogged window, Focke-Wulf 190s rested in their concrete shelters, gray fuselages nearly invisible against the spring sky of occupied France. Inside, 6 men wearing Luftwaffe flight suits laughed at something Kurt Bühligen had just said. "Too heavy," Bühligen repeated, making an exaggerated gesture with both hands as if lifting an invisible weight. "The Americans call it the Thunderbolt. We should call it the bathtub. You see one coming from behind, you pull up fast." He jerked his hand skyward, "and the P-47 cannot follow. It wallows like a pregnant cow. Then we come around and sit on its tail." The others nodded, some smiling. Bühligen had 112 victories painted beneath his cockpit canopy, small black bars that told a story of 3 years hunting over the Channel, the Russian steppes, and now back to France. When a man with 112 kills spoke about tactics, you listened. But Heinz Bear, leaning against the wall with arms crossed, wasn't smiling. At 24, he already had the eyes of someone much older, eyes that had watched too many friends spiral toward Earth trailing smoke. He'd seen the new American fighter up close twice now, once over the Dutch coast, once near Caen. "It absorbs lead," Bear said quietly, his voice cutting through the laughter. "I put half my ammunition into one last week, all strikes. Wing root, engine cowling, tail section. The thing kept flying." Bühligen waved a dismissive hand. "You probably missed the pilot." "I didn't miss anything, Kurt." The room fell silent for a moment. Outside, a ground crew chief barked orders in harsh German, his voice muffled by the concrete walls. Someone coughed. Bühligen finally shrugged, his smile returning but not quite reaching his eyes. "Then we aim better," he said. "Or we use the 190's maneuverability and stay out of their gun line entirely. The P-47 is an energy fighter. Speed and dive. If we fight our fight, not theirs, they die just like the Spitfires." Major Günther Rahl, who had been silent until now, stubbed out his cigarette on the metal table. At 25, he was already one of the most decorated pilots in the Luftwaffe. 275 victories, most against the Soviets. He'd been transferred west specifically because of the growing American threat. His left thumb was wrapped in bandages from a wound 2 weeks old, courtesy of a P-47's 50 caliber rounds that had found his hand during a turning fight. "Bühligen is correct about tactics," Rahl said, his Bavarian accent thicker than the others. "But Bear is also correct about the machine. This is not the P-40. This is not even the Spitfire. The Americans have built something different." He stood, walking to the large map of England and France pinned to the wall. His finger traced an arc from the English coast to their position. "They are still learning how to use it. Their formations are loose. Their discipline is poor. Yesterday, I watched 3 of them break away from their bombers to chase a single 109, straight into an ambush. 2 did not go home." He turned to face them, and something in his expression made even Bühligen stop smiling. "But they will learn. The Americans always do. And when they learn to fight in that heavy machine the way they should, using altitude, using speed, using those 8 machine guns as a single weapon, we will pay for every mistake." The room was silent now except for the distant whine of an engine being tested outside. "How long?" someone finally asked. It was Oberleutnant Wilhelm Galland, younger brother of the famous Adolf Galland. "Only 23, with 55 kills." Rahl looked at him for a long moment. 6 months, maybe less. "The 56th Fighter Group. They call themselves the Wolf Pack. Their commander is a man named Zemke. He flew with the Soviets as an observer. He knows war. He will teach them. Then we kill them before they learn," Bühligen said, his confidence returning. "We have the experience. We have the victories. We have the best fighter pilots in the world." Bear pushed off from the wall, grabbing his flight helmet from the bench. "Yes," he said quietly, heading for the door. "That's what we told ourselves about the Spitfire in 1940. The door closed behind him with a hollow metal clang. Horsham, St. Faith, England, the same day. The rain fell in gray sheets across the English airfield, turning the grass between the runways into a muddy soup. Inside the operations building, Colonel Hubert "Hub" Zemke stood before a chalkboard covered in tactical diagrams, his back to a room full of pilots who looked more like sullen teenagers than combat aviators. They were young, most barely 21 or 22, with faces that still carried the softness of boys who'd been playing football and chasing girls only months ago. Now they sat in uncomfortable wooden chairs, their flight jackets damp from the English weather, staring at the massive shape of a P-47B Thunderbolt, visible through the hangar doors behind their commander. Zemke turned to face them. At 29, he wasn't much older than his pilots, but something in the set of his jaw and the directness of his gaze made him seem ancient by comparison. He'd flown with the British. He'd trained Soviet pilots. He'd seen what war actually looked like. "Gentlemen," he said, his Montana accent clipping the words short, "some of you have decided that the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt is not the aircraft you wanted." A few pilots shifted in their seats. Someone coughed. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Real thunder this time, not the engine kind. "You wanted Spitfires," Zemka continued. "Light, agile, pretty. Something that turns on a dime and makes you feel like a fighter pilot from the picture shows." He walked to the chalkboard, picked up a piece of chalk, and wrote a single number, 17,500. "That's how many pounds this aircraft weighs fully loaded. Fuel, ammunition, bombs if we're carrying them. Pilot, 8 machine guns with enough ammunition to fire for 40 seconds straight." He turned back to face them. "The Spitfire Mark V weighs 9,000 pounds fully loaded." He let that sink in. "So yes, the P-47 is heavy. It climbs like a drunk elephant. It turns like a freight train. The British pilots who flew Spitfires before you, good pilots, combat veterans, they took one look at this machine and said you could defend yourself from a German fighter by running around inside the fuselage and hiding." A few nervous laughs. Zemka didn't smile. They were wrong, not about the weight, not about the climb rate. They were wrong about the hiding. He pointed at Second Lieutenant Robert Johnson, slouching in the 3rd row with his arms crossed. Johnson had failed gunnery school. Zemka had serious doubts the kid would survive his first real combat mission. "Johnson, stand up." The lieutenant stood slowly, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "You think this aircraft is a bathtub with wings, yes?" "Sir, Yes or no, Lieutenant?" A pause. "Yes, sir." "Good. That's honest." Zemka walked toward him, stopping 3 feet away. "Now let me tell you what this bathtub actually is. It's a turbocharged Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine, producing 2,000 horsepower. It's 8 Browning M2 machine guns that fire 3,200 rounds per minute combined. It's armor plating around your seat and your fuel tanks. It's a radial engine that can take a 20-millimeter cannon shell and keep running." He turned to address the whole room now, his voice rising. "This aircraft doesn't turn with a Focke-Wulf. It doesn't need to. You will use altitude, you will use speed. You will dive on them from above at speeds they cannot match. You will fire, and you will continue through, not turn back for another pass. If they run, you will catch them in the dive. If they try to climb away, your turbocharger will let you follow them to altitudes where their engines choke and die." He walked back to the chalkboard, drew a diving line from high altitude to low, then back up. "This is not air combat as dogfighting. This is air combat as execution. You become an anvil falling from the sky. The Germans will try to turn fight you. You will refuse. They will try to climb away. You will follow. And when those 850s hit them, and they will hit them, there is no aircraft in the Luftwaffe that survives that kind of firepower at convergence range." He dropped the chalk on the table with a sharp crack. "But first you have to stop thinking like Spitfire pilots. Stop thinking like this is 1918 and you're going to waltz around the sky having a gentleman's duel. The Luftwaffe has been at war for 4 years. They have men with 100 kills, 200 kills. They are not impressed by your confidence. They are not impressed by your training. They will kill you the first time you make a mistake. And you will make mistakes because you are new and they are not." The room was completely silent now. Even the rain seemed to have quieted. "So we will train every day. Formation flying until you can hold position in your sleep. Gunnery until you don't miss. Tactics until you understand that the only thing keeping you alive is the man on your wing and the decisions you make in the 3 seconds before you pull the trigger." He looked around the room, making eye contact with each pilot one by one. "The Luftwaffe thinks we're flying bathtubs. Let them think that. Let them laugh. Let them be confident." A thin smile crossed his face for the first time. "And in 6 months, when they see the 56th Fighter Group diving out of the sun at 450 miles per hour, when they hear Zemke's Wolf Pack on the radio, when they understand that we're not here to dance with them but to kill them, they won't be laughing anymore." He picked up his own flight helmet from the desk. "First mission is in 2 weeks. Get some rest. You're going to need it." The pilots filed out quietly, their faces different now, still young, still uncertain, but something had changed. They glanced at the P-47 sitting in the hangar with new eyes, seeing perhaps not the bathtub they'd mocked, but the hammer they'd been given. Outside, the rain continued to fall on England, on occupied France, on the whole of a continent at war. In their separate corners of that war, 2 groups of men prepared for the moment when they would meet in the sky. One group confident in their mastery, The other, grimly determined to prove mastery could be taught. Neither yet understood what the other was truly capable of. But they would learn. They would all learn. Over the English Channel, June 26, 1943, Robert Johnson's hands shook at 28,000 feet. Not from fear, though there was plenty, but from cold. Through the plexiglass canopy, he watched bomber contrails scratch white across blue European sky. 8th mission. He'd survived 7. Yesterday, Zemke had said, "You're getting better, kid. Stop trying to be a hero." Johnson wasn't trying to be a hero, he was trying not to die. Wolfpack lead bandits 11 o'clock high. Johnson's throat tightened, left and up, tiny black specks against sun glare. Focke-Wulf 190s dropping like hawks. Maintain formation, do not break ranks. But 3 P-47s already peeled off. Zemke's voice exploded. "God damn it, stay with the bombers." Too late. The 190s split perfectly, then 6 more appeared from below. The trap. Johnson watched the first American fighter shudder as cannon shells walked across its wing. It rolled, trailing smoke, fell toward the channel. "Jesus," someone whispered. Johnson's element stayed with bombers. Hardest thing he'd ever done. Watching men die, doing nothing, but Zemke's training held. Formation, discipline. They reached France's coast 15 minutes later. Bombers began their run. Johnson's job was simple. Keep fighters off them. That's when his canopy exploded. The same sky, different cockpit. Oberstleutnant Egon Mayer had stalked this P-47 for 3 minutes. At 102 victories, patience was his weapon. The American had drifted 200 meters from his wingman. Not much, but enough. Mayer dove, building speed. 500 meters, 400. The American jerked into a turn, too slow. Mayer's finger rested on the trigger. 200 meters. He pressed. 4 20mm cannons and 2 13mm machine guns hammered out. Strikes. Bright flashes across the P-47's wing root and fuselage. It shuddered. Kept flying. Mayer frowned, adjusted, fired again. More hits. The American jinked desperately, losing altitude. 30 seconds. Canopy shattered. Still flying. 45 seconds. Engine cowling torn, oil streaming, still flying. 60 seconds. Ammunition empty. Mayer pulled alongside the dying fighter. The pilot slumped in his seat, blood on his face. The P-47 spiraled down toward France. No parachute. Dead or would be soon. Mayer rocked his wings, a salute, and banked away. He'd seen this before. That P-47 would crash in some French field. Tragic, but this was war. He never saw the Thunderbolt stop spiraling. Never saw it level out. Never knew the pilot wasn't dead. Inside the cockpit of death, Johnson couldn't feel his face. Hot wetness ran down his neck, left hand bleeding, canopy shrapnel. Instrument panel shattered, engine sounding like a washing machine full of rocks. 21 cannon strikes, he'd counted. The Focke-Wulf had emptied everything, and the P-47 still flew. Oil pressure 0. Coolant pegged red. But that massive Pratt & Whitney radial still turned the propeller. West, had to go west, toward the Channel, toward England, toward home. 10,000 feet. The French countryside passed below, green and indifferent. 8,000. The coast appeared, that thin gray line. The Channel looked impossibly wide. 6,000. Smoke poured into the cockpit, thick, black, choking. 5,000. Over the Channel now. The engine quit, sudden silence except for wind through the shattered canopy. 4,000. White cliffs ahead, so close. 3,000. Landing gear lever. His shaking hand pulled it. Please. Grinding. One wheel locked, another. The third stuck halfway. He yanked emergency release, nothing. 2,000. Manston airfield ahead, emergency field. People pointing up at him. A P-47 with no canopy. Holes everywhere, covered in oil. Landing gear half deployed, trailing smoke. 1,000 feet. Turn to final. 500. 400. Runway threshold at 90 knots, 30 too slow. The Thunderbolt dropped the last 50 feet, hit with both main gears, bounced, came down on the stuck gear with screaming metal, slewed violently right, grinding, shrieking, finally stopping in dust and rubber. Johnson sat there, hands on stick, gasping, couldn't move. Fire trucks raced toward him, someone climbed onto the wing. "Can you move?" They pulled him out, laid him down. A mechanic walked around the P-47, mouth open. Holy Mary, Mother of God. The P-47 looked like someone took a cheese grater to it. Holes everywhere. Engine cowling gone. Canopy shattered. Both fuselage sides gaping. Rudder more hole than metal. The mechanic counted. 21 cannon strikes. Walked around. Over 100 machine gun holes. What hit you? Focke-Wulf. 1? Yeah. And you flew it back. Johnson nodded. Sir, this airplane is scrap. Nothing worth saving. But Johnson stared at the wreckage. All hell. Painted on the nose. She'd taken him through 8 missions, taken everything a Luftwaffe ace could throw, brought him home with stuck gear and an engine that should have exploded 10 times. She got me home, Johnson said quietly. The medic bandaged him, nose graze, 2 leg wounds, superficial, shrapnel cuts, nothing life-threatening. He should be dead. By every law of combat aviation, he should be a smoking hole in France. Word spread fast. By evening, the whole 56th knew. Johnson, the kid who failed gunnery school the pilot Zemka thought would die first, had taken point-blank beating from a Luftwaffe ace and survived. Zemka came that night, stood by Johnson's bed without speaking. "How many hits?" he finally asked, stopped counting at 100. "How'd the engine hold up?" "Sounded terrible. Ran anyway." Zemke nodded. "That's a Pratt & Whitney radial, air-cooled. Shoot half the cylinders off, it keeps running." He paused. "You did good. Kept your head. Got her home." "Lucky, sir." "No, luck is not getting hit. What you did was skill in that aircraft saving your ass. The Germans are learning something from this. You can't kill a Thunderbolt easily, and a pilot who trusts that is dangerous." He turned to leave, stopped at the door. "Rest up. You're flying again in 3 days." Johnson stared at the ceiling. Flying again, of course. Because this was war and Germans were still out there, and bombers needed escorts, but something had changed. Some equation solved. The P-47 wasn't beautiful, didn't turn like a zero, but it could take punishment that would obliterate anything else and keep flying. And if it could survive that, maybe he could too. 3 days later, Robert Johnson was back in the air. Egon Mayer, filing his June 26th report, recorded 1 P-47 destroyed. He would never learn the pilot survived, would never know that same American would shoot down 27 German fighters before war's end. But in Luftwaffe ready rooms, pilots heard stories. Stories about Thunderbolts that wouldn't die, about American fighters absorbing impossible damage. The jokes about bathtubs started sounding forced, the laughter hollow. Something was changing in Europe's skies. The Expert 10 could feel it, though few would admit it yet. The Americans were learning. Republic Aviation Corporation, Farmingdale, New York, November 1940. Alexander Kartveli stood alone in the empty design studio at 2 a.m., staring at blueprints covering an entire wall. Outside, Long Island slept under first snow. Inside, the Georgian engineer chain-smoked and wrestled with an impossible problem. The U.S. Army Air Corps wanted a fighter with 850 caliber machine guns, armor protection, self-sealing fuel tanks, and performance exceeding anything flying. They wanted it to fight effectively at 30,000 feet. They wanted it yesterday. The math didn't work. It had never worked. Kartveli was 44. He'd fled Soviet Georgia in 1921, abandoning family, homeland, everything. Studied aviation in Paris, where his design set a world speed record. Came to America penniless in 1927, worked up to chief engineer at Seversky Aircraft, which became Republic Aviation after a boardroom coup. Now he was being asked to design a fighter violating every principle he'd learned in 20 years. "It will be a dinosaur," his assistant had said that morning. The man wasn't wrong. 2 previous designs, XP-47 and XP-47A, had been canceled. The airframe was too small for what the Army wanted inside it. Kartveli stubbed out his cigarette, lit another, hands shaking, too much coffee, too little sleep. On the wall, red X marks covered failed attempts. Lighter engines, smaller fuel, reduced armament, all rejected. The Army had been clear. Intelligence from Europe showed Messerschmitt 109s and Focke-Wulf 190s were formidable. British Spitfires struggled. American pilots needed overwhelming firepower, rugged construction, and ability to fight at altitudes where most engines couldn't breathe. High altitude, which meant supercharging, which meant Kartveli stopped, walked to his desk, pulled out different drawings. The Seversky AP-4, experimental aircraft with turbocharger in the rear fuselage instead of engine compartment. Everyone thought it was crazy. Exhaust traveling the aircraft's entire length to reach the turbocharger, then compressed air traveling back to the engine. The ducting alone weighed as much as a small car. Inefficient, complicated. It was the only way to make this work. He began sketching rapidly. If turbocharger and tail, fuselage had to be massive for all that ducting, which meant enormous fighter, which meant enormous engine. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp, 18 cylinders, 2 rows, 2,000 horsepower, most powerful engine ever fitted to a fighter. But the R2800 was a radial, wide, draggy. Everyone knew radials were for bombers, not fighters. Inline engines were sleek, streamlined, fast, except radials didn't need liquid cooling. No coolant lines to rupture, no radiators to damage, just air-cooled cylinders that could lose half their number to battle damage and keep running. He sketched faster, cigarette burning forgotten. The ducting system took shape. Intake under engine, ducts running back along cockpit sides, turbocharger in rear fuselage. Compressed air forward through intercooler, then to engine. Like the aircraft was alive, cockpit would sit high, had to clear plumbing. High cockpit meant excellent visibility. Wings thick to handle weight, mounted low for ground handling. Landing gear retracting inward, cleaner than Seversky's complicated system. 8 50 calibers, 4 per wing. Converging at 300 yards. Any aircraft hit by that combined firepower would disintegrate. By 4 a.m., he had it. Complete preliminary design. It violated every aesthetic principle of fighter design. Heavy, expensive, would look like someone strapped wings to a water heater, but it would work. 6 months later, May 6, 1941, test pilot Lowry Brabham climbed into the XP-47B prototype at dawn. The aircraft on Farmingdale's runway was a monster, largest single-engine fighter anyone had built. Mechanics had worked around the clock for weeks. Kartveli stood beside the runway, hands in coat pockets. Hadn't slept more than 4 hours in 3 days. This was it. Succeed or fail. Brabham fired up the R-2800. The sound was catastrophic. 2,000 horses bellowing through exhaust. The whole aircraft shook. On third attempt, the engine caught, settled into rough idle-like controlled explosions. The P-47 looked enormous next to parked P-40s, like a father surrounded by children. Pre-flight checks, control surfaces. Then Brabham released brakes, pushed throttle forward. The P-47 lumbered down runway, picking up speed agonizingly slow. 40 knots, 50, 60, tail up. 75, 80. Main gear lifted off, and the massive fighter was airborne, climbing with all the grace of a freight train learning to fly. Kartveli released a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Flight plan: take off, fly to Mitchell Field, land, 30 minutes maximum, just prove it could fly. 20 minutes passed, 30. 45. Engineers glanced at each other. Kartveli stared at empty sky, smoking. Something was wrong. Then radio crackled. Farmingdale, this is Brabham. I've got smoke in the cockpit. A lot of smoke. Oil burning in exhaust duct. I'm landing at Mitchell. The team rushed to Mitchell Field. Brabham stood beside the P-47, covered in soot, grinning like a maniac. What happened? Kartveli asked, accent thick with stress. Oil accumulated in exhaust ducting during pre-flight. When I went full power, it caught fire. The whole duct system became a furnace. Smoke everywhere, couldn't see instruments. Considered bailing out 3 times. But you didn't. No, sir. Brabham slapped the P-47's fuselage. Because this magnificent beast kept flying, engine never missed a beat. Controls stayed responsive. Fire burned itself out, and when I landed hot and heavy, she took it like she was built for it. He looked at Kartveli directly. Sir, I think we've hit the jackpot. The same day, evening, Kartveli sat in his office, windows dark. Desk lamp the only light. Brabham's report. Successful first flight. Minor issues. Recommended modifications. The prototype had flown. It had worked. He thought about his younger brother Mikhail, killed in Georgia during Soviet takeover. About his mother, who died in Paris in 1935, never seeing her homeland again. About family he'd left behind. Names he didn't know were still alive. This aircraft wasn't just engineering. It was survival made metal, knowledge that when the world tries to kill you, you build something that refuses to die. Heavy means armor. Complicated means redundancy. Ugly because beauty is luxury and war is not. Germans had Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs, sleek, efficient, deadly. But the P-47 would be something else. A blunt instrument, a hammer, an aircraft absorbing punishment that would obliterate anything else and keep fighting. 3 years from now, American boys would climb into these machines and fly into hell. Some would die, but many would survive because the Georgian refugee in this office had learned the 20th century's most important lesson. In modern war, survival isn't about elegance. It's about engineering margin. Building in so much redundancy, so much strength, so much brutal functionality that even when everything goes wrong, the machine keeps working. A knock. His secretary, Mr. Kartveli. They're asking how many they should build. He looked at the report. The P-47 Thunderbolt, his dinosaur, his monster, his gift to boys he'd never meet. Tell them to build as many as they can, he said quietly. Build them until the war is over. They would build 15,683 before the last one rolled off in December 1945. More than any other American fighter, the P-47 would destroy over 7,000 enemy aircraft, more than half in air-to-air combat. Kill ratio of 4, 6 to 1. Loss rate of 0, 7 per mission, lowest of any American fighter in the war. But that night, Kartveli knew none of that. He knew only that his impossible design had flown, had survived fire and smoke and near panic, and had come home. That was enough. He turned off the lamp and walked into the Long Island night. Somewhere across the Atlantic, war raged. Luftwaffe aces with hundreds of kills patrolled the skies. They were the best in the world. They had no idea what was coming for them. Over Germany, May 12th, 1944. Hub Zemke checked his oxygen at 29,000 feet. Below, German farmland looked pastoral, green fields, dark forests. Beautiful, if you ignored everything down there wanted you dead. 4 P-47s in loose formation. Today was different. Today, Zemke tested his new tactic, the Zemke fan. Spread fighters ahead of bombers. Hunt, find German fighters before they organized attacks. General Kepner had been skeptical. You're letting fighters roam while bombers are vulnerable? Bombers are vulnerable when Messerschmitts have time to form up. We hit them during assembly. We save bombers. One mission to prove it. Wolfpack lead. Contrails at 2 o'clock high. Multiple contacts. Zemke banked right. High and ahead. 8 or 9 aircraft climbing. Messerschmitt Bf-109s. Hadn't seen the P-47s yet. Too focused on altitude. We're going after them. Maintain element integrity. But one P-47 developed engine trouble. Lead. Losing manifold pressure. Oil temp rising. Have to abort. 3 P-47s now. Odds just got worse. They climbed hard. Turbocharged R-2800 delivering full power at 31,000 feet. Below, Messerschmitts continued climbing, unaware. Then everything went wrong. 7 more Bf-109s appeared from below and behind. Perfect bounce. Zemke's element caught between 2 groups. The trap had been for them. Brake right. Too late. The lead German fighter, marked with JG-11 colors, cut inside their turn. Intelligence reports. JG-11 commanded by Major Günther Rall, 275 victories, 3rd highest scoring ace in the Luftwaffe, and Rall was flying today, the same sky, German perspective. Major Günther Rall saw the P-47s the moment they climbed. Good aircraft, good pilots, but they'd made the classic mistake, didn't check their 6. His wingmen already positioned. 7 aircraft, perfect coordination, no radio needed. Communication through geometry and violence learned through hundreds of sorties. Americans trying the fan tactic, his wingmen observed. Zemke's innovation. Rall smiled. He'd read about Zemke, former Soviet liaison, combat observer during Britain, smart, experienced. But Rall had been fighting since 1940, 4 years. The P-47s broke right. Rall anticipated, cut inside. His Bf-109 lighter, more maneuverable at altitude. The American lead started defensive circle. Lufberry tactic, smart. Make attackers expose themselves. But Rall had broken Lufberry circles before. He dove, built speed, pulled up hard at oblique angle. Not straight through, but at deflection, putting him in front of one P-47, behind another, gun sight aligned. 200 meters, 20mm cannons fired. 3 seconds. Strikes across tail and right wing. Pieces flew. The Thunderbolt rolled violently, trailing smoke. 1 down. Rall reversed hard, pulling Gs until vision grade. Second P-47 turning to engage. But Rall positioned for deflection shot. The American dove to build speed. Not fast enough. Rall led perfectly. Fired. Strikes. The P-47 shuddered, kept flying. Those machines were tough, but damaged, pulling away east. 2 down. American lead and 1 wingman remained. Both defensive mutual support, good tactics, but Rall had 6 Messerschmitts attacking from different angles. The leader, had to be Zemke, flew brilliantly. Every time a Bf-109 lined up, he'd jink just enough to throw off deflection. The man knew his aircraft intimately. Rall climbed above, watching. Zemke's wingman broke off. Now Zemke was alone. 3 Messerschmitts scissoring with him. This is lead. I'm taking the American commander. Clear me an angle. His pilots responded instantly, pulling away. Zemke stopped defensive maneuvering and dove. Straight down, full throttle. Rall followed, pushing past red line. The American was fast. P-47's weight and power gave incredible speed. But Rall stayed with him, closing meter by meter. 25,000 feet, 20,000. German countryside rushing up. Zemke in barrel roll, corkscrew dive, trying to throw off aim. Rall adjusted, leading, compensating. 300 meters, finger moved to trigger. Zemke pulled out, hard, brutally hard. The P-47's massive wings bit air, leveled at 15,000 feet. pulling Gs that should have torn wings off. Rawl pulled too, but his lighter Messerschmitt couldn't match that radius. He flashed past Zemka, overtaking by 200 meters, advantage reversed. American behind him now, climbing, gaining position. Rawl rolled inverted, pulled through split S, dove again, trying to regain speed, position, but Zemka didn't follow. The American climbed west, alone, probably low on fuel. Rawl leveled at 12,000 feet, breathing hard. Left hand throbbed. Thumb injury from 2 weeks ago reopened during high G maneuvering. Blood stained his glove. He looked back where Zemka disappeared. That American was good, his wingman said. Yes, Rawl replied quietly. Very good. Horsham, St. Faith, England. That evening Zemka sat in debriefing, face neutral, while intelligence officer took notes. 2 P-47s lost, 1 damaged but recovered. Mission objective. Test Zemka fan. Inconclusive. The aircraft that engaged you directly? Messerschmitt Bf-109, JG-11 markings. Pilot was. Zemka paused. Exceptionally skilled. Best I've encountered. Did you get a kill? No. Did the enemy? 2 of my element, maybe 3 if the damaged bird doesn't make it. After debriefing, Zemke walked alone to the flight line. Sun setting, painting countryside orange and gold. Beautiful, a lie. He replayed the fight, every decision, every maneuver. The German pilot, almost certainly Rawl, had been better, not just good, better. The deflection shooting, tactical awareness, commanding multi-aircraft engagement while personally engaging the most dangerous target, masterful. Zemka had trained the best fighters in the 8th Air Force, developed tactics changing the air war. Today, he'd been outflown by a Luftwaffe ace who made it look easy. Sir Johnson, Robert Johnson, no longer a kid. 40 missions now, 10 kills. Heard about the mission. Rough day. Yeah, the fan tactic. Is it done? Zemke looked at P-47 silhouetted against sunset. No, tactic is sound. Execution needs refinement. We got surprised. Won't happen again. The German pilot. Reports say Rawl, Gunther Rawl. Probably. 275 kills. They say he's one of the best. Zemka nodded. He is. But here's what they don't understand. Rawl is brilliant, experienced. Probably the most naturally gifted fighter pilot I've ever seen. But he's fighting for a losing side with dwindling resources and no replacements. He pointed at P-47s. We lost 3 aircraft today. Tomorrow, 6 more arrive from the States. We lost pilots, good pilots. Tomorrow, fresh graduates replace them. Rawl shoots down 10, 10 more arrive. Shoots down 100, 100 more arrive. Zemke touched the cold fuselage. Germans are fighting a war of excellence against attrition. Excellence always loses to attrition. Rawl can outfly me, probably outfly any pilot in the 8th Air Force. Doesn't matter. We have time, resources, production. He has experience that dies with every pilot we kill, but we lost today. Yes, and we'll lose tomorrow and the day after. Individual battles, but the war. Germans already lost that. They just haven't realized it yet. He started walking, then stopped. Johnson, one more thing. That German pilot had me dead to rights. Had me in his sights twice, could have killed me both times. Know why he didn't? Johnson shook his head. Because I was flying a P-47. When he did hit me, 4 cannon strikes in tail. The aircraft absorbed it. Any other fighter, I'm dead. Smoking hole in Germany. But the P-47 took it, kept flying, got me home. He looked at Johnson. Kartveli built us armor. Russian engineers taught me tactics. You and the Wolfpack are learning patience. And the Germans? Running out of fuel, pilots, time. Rawl can shoot down every P-47 in Europe. Won't change the end. Years later, Zemke would meet Rawl at an aviation conference. 2 old pilots, enemies once. They would talk about that fight over Germany in May 1944. Rawl would say he remembered, the American who escaped through sheer aircraft performance and willpower. Zemke would buy him a drink. They would laugh. But that evening in 1944, standing on an English airfield as darkness fell, Zemke felt only the weight of command and bitter knowledge that excellence wasn't enough. Being the best pilot meant nothing if the man trying to kill you flew a better machine built by a country with infinite resources. Germans were the best pilots in the world. Americans had the best system. In modern war, systems beat skill every time. Zemke walked inside. Tomorrow they would fly again. Germans would be waiting. The dance would continue until one side ran out of dancers. The Luftwaffe was already running out. Normandy, France, July 29, 1944. From 3,000 feet, Captain Ed Fisher saw it clearly. A German armored column stretched for miles, trapped between American tank divisions. Panzers, half-tracks, supply trucks, artillery. Thousands of men trying desperately to escape east before the trap became a tomb. They weren't going to make it. Fisher led 16 P-47s from the 405th Fighter Group, fully loaded, 8 50 calibers per aircraft, 5-inch rockets, 500-pound bombs. They'd been circling 20 minutes waiting for clearance. Thunderflight, this is Groundhog. You are cleared to engage. Priority targets, armored vehicles, and command cars. The road is yours. Roger. Thunderflight going in. Follow me down. Fisher rolled inverted, pulled through into a dive. The world tilted, sky where ground should be. Airspeed climbed past 300 knots, 320, 340. The P-47 was a missile now. Air screamed over the canopy. At 2,000 feet, he pickled off his bombs. 2 black shapes tumbled away, arcing toward clustered vehicles at a crossroads. Fisher pulled hard, climbing away, G-forces pressing him into his seat. Behind him, bombs detonated, orange fireballs, secondary explosions, ammunition cooking off, fuel tanks rupturing. Black smoke boiled skyward. Good hits lead, going in. 15 P-47s followed in sequence, diving, bombing, pulling away. The narrow French road disappeared under smoke and fire, but bombing was just the opening. The real killing would be done with guns. Thunderflight, form up for strafing, line abreast, 5-second spacing. We'll work west to east, push them into the pocket. Watch your altitude, there's flak. The P-47s formed a long line, like predators lining up for a hunt. Fisher armed his 50 calibers, 8 guns, 3,200 rounds per minute combined, enough to saw a tank in half. He pushed the nose down, building speed. At 500 feet, the column resolved into individuals. A Panther tank, 2 half-tracks full of infantry, a Kubelwagen, probably officers, supply trucks, a Flak 38 anti-aircraft gun, crew frantically traversing to track incoming Thunderbolts. Fisher aligned the flak gun in his sight and pressed the trigger. The P-47 shuddered as all 8 guns fired. Tracer rounds, every 5th, drew brilliant red lines from wings to target. The flak gun and crew disappeared in dust and fragments. Fisher held the trigger, walking his fire along the column. Half-track exploded. Kubelwagen disintegrated. Soldiers scattered, running for ditches, trees, anywhere but the road. He released at 300 feet, pulled up hard. Behind him, 15 more P-47s made their runs. The sound was apocalyptic, continuous roar of 50 caliber fire that never stopped. One aircraft would pull up, another would roll in, no gaps, no pauses. Just unrelenting mechanical violence from above. Thunder lead, secondary targets on parallel road, grid 237. Fisher banked left, saw it. Another column trying to use farm roads to bypass. Smaller vehicles, trucks and cars still trying to escape. Roger, same procedure. They made another pass, then another, then another. The summer afternoon dragged on, and P-47s kept coming. When the 405th exhausted ammunition, the 362nd Fighter Group arrived, then the 368th, then the 371st. A rotating cast of Thunderbolts, each group hitting the trapped Germans, returning to rearm and refuel, then coming back. Fisher's group made 4 complete sorties. By the 4th run, so much smoke covered the target area he navigated by compass and dead reckoning. The roads had ceased to exist, just burning scars across landscape. At 2140 hours, nearly sunset, Fisher brought his flight home. His P-47 smelled like cordite and hot metal. Gun barrels blackened from sustained fire. He'd expended over 2,400 rounds that day. His hands shook from adrenaline and fatigue. Debriefing took 3 hours. Intelligence wanted everything: target locations, vehicle types, damage assessments. Fisher told them what he knew. It had been a slaughter. The trapped column had nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. Estimated enemy losses? Everything that was on those roads, Fisher replied. We destroyed everything. On the ground, the same day, Oberleutnant Klaus Meyer crouched in a drainage ditch beside what used to be the main road. His ears rang, his uniform torn and filthy. The man next to him, Feldwebel Schmidt, his driver, was dead. Killed when their staff car took a 50 caliber burst that walked across the vehicle like a buzzsaw. Meyer didn't know how long he'd been in the ditch. Hours? The American fighters kept coming. Every time he thought it was over, more would arrive. They worked in shifts, like factory workers, methodically destroying everything. He risked a glance over the ditch lip. The road was unrecognizable, burning vehicles everywhere, panzers with turrets blown off, half-tracks gutted by fire, supply trucks reduced to twisted metal, bodies everywhere, some crawling toward cover, most not moving at all. A Panther tank 30 meters ahead was now a smoking hulk. He'd watched a P-47 dive straight down, impossibly fast, released 2 rockets that streaked toward the tank. First rocket struck the turret, second the engine. The Panther burned 20 minutes before ammunition cooked off, turning the vehicle into a bomb that killed everyone within 50 meters. That's when Meyer had run for the ditch. Aircraft engines grew louder, more of them, always more. Meyer pressed himself flat, hands over his head, praying to a god he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. The strafing run started at the column's far end, a sound like 1,000 hammers on steel, moving closer. The 50 caliber rounds punched through armor like paper. He'd seen a Kubelwagen simply come apart, pieces flying everywhere. The sound moved closer, closer. Earth shook. Explosions, screams, metal tearing, burning rubber and flesh. Then it passed. The P-47 pulled up, climbing with a roar Meyer felt in his chest. He stayed in the ditch, not moving, barely breathing. Night eventually came. American fighters didn't fly at night, didn't need to. They'd done their work. Meyer climbed out on shaking legs and looked at what remained of the 2nd SS Panzer Division's breakout attempt. Nothing, just wreckage and fire and silence. He started walking east toward German lines, if there still were German lines. Past burning tanks, past bodies, past equipment that would never be used. He walked through what had been one of the Wehrmacht's finest armored divisions, and was now just scattered metal and dead men on a French road. When American infantry found him 3 days later, half dead from dehydration and shock, he surrendered without a word. They asked what unit he was from, what happened. He told them about the road, about the American fighters, about watching an entire armored column destroyed in a single afternoon by aircraft that never seemed to run out of ammunition or pilots or fuel. The American lieutenant who questioned him took notes, then said something Meyer would never forget. "You got hit by Thunderbolts. You're lucky to be alive. Most guys caught in the open by those don't walk away." Meyer nodded. He knew he was lucky. Lucky to have found a ditch. Lucky that the particular P-47 strafing his position had aimed at vehicles and not ditches. Lucky that of the 3,000 men in his division on that road, he was one of maybe 200 who survived. Lucky. Luftwaffe Headquarters, Germany, July 30th, 1944. General Feldmarschall Adolf Galland read the report 3 times. Each time he hoped he'd misread something. Each time the numbers stayed the same. The 2nd SS Panzer Division, what remained, had been caught on the road between Rancy and Saint-Denis-le-Vetu. American fighter bombers, primarily P-47 Thunderbolts, attacked continuously from 15:10 hours to 21:40 hours. Ground investigation confirmed. 66 tanks destroyed, 204 vehicles destroyed, 11 artillery pieces destroyed. Estimated casualties, over 2,000 killed or wounded. 1 division, 1 afternoon, effectively destroyed from the air. Galland set the report down, lit a cigarette with shaking hands. He'd been a fighter pilot since Spanish Civil War, commanded fighter wings in Battle of Britain. He understood air combat, understood attrition mathematics, understood how air power could influence ground warfare. But this was different. This wasn't air combat. This was industrial-scale slaughter. The Americans had attacked with such overwhelming force, such methodical precision, that the trapped German column had no response, no defense. They'd just died, systematically, while P-47s rotated through like factory shifts. His adjutant entered. "Sir, the report from Normandy Command. I've read it. There's more, sir. The 405th Fighter Group alone flew over 200 sorties yesterday. Across all groups involved, the Americans flew nearly 1,500 sorties against the pocket. We estimate they expended over 800,000 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition. 800,000 rounds." Galland tried to imagine that much firepower concentrated on a single road. Tried to imagine commanding troops under that assault. He couldn't. There was no precedent for this in military history. The Luftwaffe response? "Minimal, sir. 2 Staffeln from JG-26 attempted interception. They were driven off by P-51 escorts. No German aircraft reached the ground attack aircraft. Of course not. The Americans had air superiority so complete they could fly close air support missions without fear of interception, could orbit over German positions, taking their time, selecting targets, destroying them methodically. Galland walked to the window, looked out at German countryside. Beautiful summer day, blue sky, birds singing. Somewhere west, his pilots were dying, his ground forces were dying, and there was nothing, absolutely nothing, he could do about it. The Americans had taken the P-47 Thunderbolt, a fighter German aces initially mocked as too heavy, too clumsy, and turned it into the most effective ground attack aircraft in the war. Those 850 calibers that seemed excessive for air combat were perfect for destroying armor. That heavy armor that made the aircraft slow made it nearly invulnerable to ground fire. That massive radial engine that created drag could absorb catastrophic damage and keep running. Everything the Germans had laughed about had become exactly why the P-47 was killing them. "What are our options?" his adjutant asked quietly. Galland looked at him for a long moment, then stubbed out his cigarette. "We have no options. The Luftwaffe received its death blow in the Ardennes. What happened at Roncy yesterday was just Germany learning what it means to lose air superiority. The Americans can do that to any column, any concentration of forces, anywhere in France. And we cannot stop them." He picked up the Roncy report one more time, then dropped it in the trash. What was the point? One disaster among hundreds. One more unit destroyed. One more data point in the slow-motion collapse of the Third Reich. After his adjutant left, Galland sat alone as afternoon faded into evening. He thought about Kurt Bühligen, who'd said the P-47 wallowed like a pregnant cow, about Heinz Behr, who'd warned it could absorb impossible punishment, about Rahl, who'd defeated the best American pilots in the sky. All of them had been right and wrong simultaneously. Right about the aircraft's characteristics, wrong about what those characteristics meant in actual warfare. The P-47 wasn't designed to dogfight Messerschmitts. It was designed to carry 8 machine guns and armor and fuel into combat zones, stay there for hours, destroy everything on the ground, and come home despite taking damage that would kill any other fighter. And it had succeeded beyond anyone's imagination, including the Americans themselves. Outside his window, the summer evening was peaceful and beautiful. The war felt distant, almost unreal, but it was very real, and Germany was losing it, one devastated road at a time. Ardennes Forest, Belgium, January 1st, 1945. Snow fell in thick curtains across the Belgian forest. Hitler's last great offensive, the Battle of the Bulge, raged below. Germans had planned it for winter, when Allied air power would be grounded. But the Germans miscalculated. The Thunderbolts flew anyway. At dawn, nearly 1,000 German aircraft launched Operation Bodenplatte, the Luftwaffe's final desperate gambit. They destroyed over 200 Allied aircraft on the ground, including 22 P-47s at Y-34 airfield. A captured German pilot stood in the snow, watching his handiwork burn. He looked at the American major and said in perfect English, "What do you think of that?" The major glanced at the burning aircraft, then at the horizon where factory-fresh Thunderbolts were already arriving. "We'll have more by tomorrow, will you?" The German didn't answer. He knew the truth. The Luftwaffe had just expended its remaining strength destroying aircraft that would be replaced in days. There would be no second strike. This was the end. May 8, 1945, VE Day. The war in Europe ended at 1 minute past midnight. Hub Zemke, liberated from Stalag Luft even 3 weeks earlier, stood at Boxted Airfield watching the 56th Fighter Group's P-47s lined up on the hard stand. Zemke's Wolfpack had claimed 677, 5 aerial victories, more than any other 8th Air Force fighter group. "Sir, Captain Johnson, 27 confirmed kills. What happens to them now?" Zemke looked at the Thunderbolts. "Most will be scrapped. Some will go to air forces that need fighters. A few will end up in museums." He paused. "But what they did, what we did, that doesn't get scrapped." Across the Atlantic, Alexander Kartveli sat in his Republic Aviation office, reading final production numbers. 15,683 P-47 Thunderbolts built. More than any other American fighter, the dinosaur that shouldn't have flown had become the backbone of Allied air power. He thought about the Georgian boy who'd fled the Bolsheviks, studied in Paris, came to America with nothing. That boy had built a machine that helped win a war, had saved thousands of lives by creating an aircraft that could absorb punishment and bring pilots home. Later would come the F-84, the F-105 Thunderchief, and eventually consultations on the A-10 Warthog, spiritual successor to the P-47, carrying the Thunderbolt name into a new era. Luftwaffe Debriefing Center, Germany, May 1945. Gunther Rahl sat across from American intelligence officers, answering questions about tactics, aircraft performance, training methods. The P-47, your assessment? Rahl thought for a long moment. "When we first saw it, we laughed. Too heavy, too slow to climb, easy prey." He lit a cigarette. "We were wrong. P-47 pilots learned to fight to their aircraft's strengths. They didn't try to turn with us. Used altitude, speed, incredible firepower. And the aircraft itself, I once put 4 cannon strikes into a P-47's tail. It flew home. Any other fighter would have disintegrated. If you could have designed the perfect fighter for Germany's defense, what would it be?" Rahl smiled bitterly. "I would have copied the P-47. Heavy armor, powerful engine, devastating armament, ability to absorb damage. Your engineers understood something we didn't. that in modern war, survivability matters more than elegance. Years later, these debriefings would influence the design of the A-10 Warthog, an aircraft carrying forward the P-47's philosophy. Build it tough, arm it heavily, make sure it brings the pilot home. Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. Present day, the P-47D Thunderbolt sits in the Udvar-Hazy Center, its massive form dwarfing sleeker fighters around it. Visitors walk past, many stopping to read the placard. Republic P-47D Thunderbolt, largest and heaviest single-engine fighter of World War II, 15,683 built. Kill ratio, 4:6:1. Loss rate, 0.07 per mission, lowest of any American fighter. Destroyed over 7,000 enemy aircraft and 170,000 ground targets. An elderly man stops, staring at the aircraft. His grandson tugs his sleeve. "Grandpa, did you fly these?" The old man nods. 62 missions over Germany, France, Belgium. This machine saved my life 3 times. Took hits that should have killed me. Got me home every time. Was it a good fighter? The old man thinks about scared 20-year-olds learning to fly a 7-ton aircraft into combat. About Zemke's tactics and Kartveli's engineering. About German aces who were better pilots but had fewer resources. About Johnson limping home with 100 holes. About roads in France covered with destroyed German armor. It was the right fighter, he finally says. Not the prettiest, not the fastest, but the right one for the job we had to do. They walk on, and the Thunderbolt sits in silence, a testament to the men who flew it and the engineer who built it. A reminder that wars aren't won by the best individual warriors, but by the best systems. That elegance is nice, but survival is essential. That sometimes the weapon that wins isn't the one that looks heroic, but the one that refuses to die. In every war machine, there's a human story of fear, brilliance, and survival. The P-47 Thunderbolt story is that of Alexander Kartveli, a refugee who built armor, of Hub Zemke, who taught patience, of Robert Johnson, who learned that coming home matters more than glory, of countless young Americans who climbed into the heaviest fighter ever built and discovered that weight means strength, and strength means survival. The Germans were right when they called it the bathtub. They just never understood that sometimes what looks like a joke becomes the weapon that ends you. History isn't made by generals, it's built by minds like these. The P-47 Thunderbolt, the giant they mocked, the hammer that never broke, the testament of iron that brought them all home. If this story left you stunned, you're going to be absolutely blown away by what you're about to see next. Another forgotten hero. Another impossible situation. Another moment where one man's refusal to follow orders changed everything. Trust me, you don't want to miss this one.